What's up, everybody? Welcome to the very first episode of The Dig, where we talk about everything volleyball training and jumping related, and also dig deeper into the life behind the person. And the person today I'm very excited to introduce is Tyler Rae, who is our very first guest. And he is the owner of PPA, as you can see on his amazing PPA apparel, which is Project Pure Athlete, which you can find on Instagram, and I'll put that link in the video. Also a former professional dunker. And also, most importantly, he is also a jump training specialist, world renowned. He's trained people all over the world. People come to him specifically for jumping in multiple sports. So what's unique about Tyler's training, if you check out his YouTube channel and his Instagram, is that he has a very, very technical approach to jumping. Most people are just all about force production, but he's very about the mechanics, and he's famous for increasing people's verticals a couple inches, right, within the first 10 minutes.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it all
Sometimes.
lines up.
Yeah. And one thing I really appreciate about he says about mindful training, not just mindlessly doing the repetition, but being very in tune with what you're doing and connecting your entire nervous system and your spirit with what you're doing with training. So, did I miss anything? You want to add anything to
That was
that?
a hell of an intro, man. I'm sitting on my end going, "Holy crap!" But no, you nailed it right on the head. Yeah, I competed for many years as a highly competitive athlete in the sport of first and foremost track and field for almost 20 years, and was a multi-event athlete. So I was a pentathlete indoor for the University of Windsor in Canada. I'm a Canadian boy, proud North. And then I kind of transitioned after track and field. My body had had enough of the track beating up on it into the world of dunking, and eventually was able to kind of take that craft and my ability to jump and dunk and get people excited all over the world, and meet a lot of really cool people, and dunk with some phenomenal athletes that I think still fly under the radar, which is crazy to me. I
Yeah.
think there's so many unknown aliens kind of just plotted on this earth that can jump out of the gym and really excite people. So that was really cool. And then also meeting coaches and professionals in the field that kind of solidified my love for what I did. So no, you hit everything right on the head there with that intro, and I appreciate it. And I'm super excited to be your first guest, man. I didn't
Yeah.
even know I was your first guest. This is like a surprise to me. So hell yeah, this is awesome. And let's get after it, man. Let's talk some sports and some athletics and some jumping.
Yeah. Let's do it. So, first question I got to ask you, since even though you are coming from a basketball background and track and field, since my channel deals a lot with volleyball, so it's going to be more volleyball and jumping related. One thing I've always loved about meeting other Canadians is they actually have a really deep appreciation for volleyball. And I'm sure you already know this working with Americans, but in the US, it's dumb how volleyball is viewed as a girl sport just because it's so popular here. But around the world, it's really big in the men's world. But I know in Canada, especially, every volleyball player I talk to knows all the international athletes, is very in tune with what's going on. So if you can share with me your volleyball experience, because I noticed that you're a right-left plant dunker as a
Yes.
right-hander, which is more volleyball specific. Because a lot of the basketball people I work with are goofy-footed in volleyball terms, but are
Yep.
naturally left-right. So go ahead and talk about your volleyball experience.
Yeah, so I have played volleyball my whole life. So in high school, I was a three sport athlete. I had basketball, volleyball, and track. And to be perfectly honest, I think more than one occasion I've been playing volleyball, and the people I'm playing with would say, I think you missed your sport, man. I think this was your sport." And I just decided to head another direction. So I played obviously through high school. We didn't have a lot of club teams where I grew up, so there wasn't a lot of stuff in my area to play, and that's something that I never played was club volleyball. And now that I work with a lot of club athletes, and specifically in this area, Windsor, Ontario, which is like heavily populated with volleyball athletes, people will always go, "What club did you play for? Or where did you play for?" And I had like high school, like I have no reference point.
Yeah.
I did try out and make the university men's team in my fourth year. I did
Nice.
track and field for the University of Windsor, And then in my last year, a lot of my buddies were on the volleyball team, and I would always go out and scrimmage with them, and have contests where, and I was pretty well known as a higher jumper, especially off 2 feet in university. So people would always call me out and see if I could block them or see if they could block me, and yeah, so I just decided to give it a go in my 4th year to see if I could make the team. I made the team. Unfortunately, I couldn't participate that season due to some other circumstances, but it was nice to know that I could compete at a pretty high level in volleyball. I played doubles beach for about 3 years in a row, and not rec beach. Like I'm not an athlete or a person, and I imagine you're pretty similar to me, where when you get involved in something, while it's fun, it's like I'm a competitor. I like to push myself. I like to play at a level that's reflective of my abilities.
Yeah.
So when I got into beach, I picked it up pretty quick, and my partner and I, yeah, we played a few summers traveling around and playing in tournaments, and it was a lot of fun. So I think beach doubles was actually, in terms of volleyball, my favorite volleyball sport, I guess you'd put it,
Hmm.
simply because it was 2 people and I was at the net the entire time, so I blocked all the time, and it was just nonstop jumping. So for me, that
Yeah.
was like I was in heaven. But yeah, volleyball I've played, and I love it, and I still, I think up until a couple of years ago, I was playing in a local mixed, like, amateur league, and then just got pulled into the coaching realm. And I think now this year, 2019, I think we all do the cliched, resolutions. And I think for me, it's just to get back in and get involved with some rec sports again, just to get my body back and moving. So I love
Yeah.
volleyball, and I'm obsessed with jumping, and any sport that expresses some component of jumping, I'm right on board.
Yeah. Speaking of beach volleyball, I always wonder from your perspective, the ground contact time is obviously influenced because it's a softer surface.
Mhm.
So, in your opinion, does that nullify the effect of the ground contact time? So you end up being more of a, I guess, glute and quad dominant jumping where you have to get lower to produce more force, where on a harder surface, you don't
Mhm.
have to get that low because it's converting speed, right? So, what's your opinion on the difference between, I guess, that last two steps in jumping beach and indoor?
Yeah, so I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. It's a different combination or different initiation of the same steps, right? I talk a little bit about how, jump technique will never vary by kind, only ever by need. So it's basically just the way in which you apply the principles varies. They don't change. You still have a penultimate stride, which is our second last step. You still have a block foot, which is entirely responsible for changing direction. But in the case of sand, our primary need of jumping off sand is to compress the loose surface beneath our feet as fast as possible, right? So
Okay.
application of force and rate of force development plays a huge role. Now, ground contact time will inherently be longer because of the fact that it requires time to compress. So what I teach, and the difference between court and beach, is I talk a lot about on court and indoor is the concept of pushing through the penultimate stride, that push into a punch being our last contact. And we can dive a little bit further into that later. But with the beach approach, what we're getting is a little bit more of what we call a gallop or a hop step, where we're actually
Mhm.
taking off, covering a little bit of horizontal or vertical distance before trying to compress the sand beneath our feet. So really, it's just a matter of learning how to apply those forces quickly in an eccentric fashion as you impact the ground, and then working as fast as you can in the opposite direction. So it doesn't play a big role. You can't utilize as much horizontal speed or velocity.
Yeah.
So the requirements of your body are going to be a little bit more towards the relative power output that the person has. Position becomes extremely important in beach, right? Because if you're a centimeter off on the court, you can counteract that a lot with the fact that we get to introduce a lot of horizontal speed. If you're out of position taking off in the sand, you're kind of walking an uphill battle at that point. You
Mhm.
want to optimize as much of your position in the sand as possible so that the force you are applying is converted. So it's really just a matter of, no matter if you're approaching in the sand or you're approaching on the court, it's going to be, the approach should never change, meaning that the technical elements don't change. It's just the timing at which you initiate them will change.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I do notice that in beach, the penultimate stride, the knee is more bent
Mhm.
compared to indoor jumpers because longer stride, so you want to maximize the extension. But I didn't realize it was because you're trying to compress it to create
Mhm.
that hard surface to jump up.
People will do that inherently, right? It's my
Okay.
goal as a jump technique specialist is to create an intuitive jumper, someone that expresses the mechanics of jumping without thinking about it. For me, it's like I played around with jumping so much growing up. I was obsessed with it since I was a kid. So I've always, anywhere I've went, and if you talk to another dunker or perhaps even another volleyball player, you can imagine walking through like a mall when you're young and there's like signs hanging off that you're trying to like constantly trying to jump and touch
Yeah.
everything that's over your head. And I imagine you're the same way. If you're at all interested in jumping, you take the opportunities to jump. But a lot of times what I get is athletes coming in that are like, I want to jump higher, but they don't have that same connection to jumping that I do, and
Mhm.
some people that I know have. So it's, how do I impart these intuitive behaviors onto an athlete that doesn't necessarily have them? They have to fall in love with jumping and the act of jumping first. So a
Mhm.
lot of like what I do is really accessing the athlete's mentality, and it's like trying to bridge that connection between them and myself so that I can impart the highly powerful passion that I have into them, so that their movements are much more intuitive. Yes, lifting the leg and compressing on the penultimate is a result of having to compress the sand, but that's something that you will have done probably naturally
Mhm.
because you're aware of your body and you're aware of the needs of your body in jumping. A lot of people don't have these intuitive behaviors, so that's why I feel like this path that I'm carving out is so necessary. It's
Mhm.
just teaching people who don't think about it the same way how to think about it.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
Mhm.
Now, being a former professional dunker, what differences and similarities do you see between basketball style jumping and volleyball style jumping?
It's a great question.
Specifically off of 2 foot.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've actually never been asked that question, but I talk about it a lot through a lot of my posts. And I'll start first with talking a little bit about the crossover between the two, in the sense that I get a lot of volleyball athletes that come in that I can tell right out of the gate also play basketball and or play basketball more frequently than volleyball.
Mhm.
One indicator is if it's a right-handed athlete, typically they are a goofy-footed approach. And the reason that they're goofy-footed is that when we play basketball from a young age, we're patterned as right-handed athletes to take off our left leg to keep our ball away from our defender in a layup scenario. So when they convert over to jumping off of 2 feet, the instinct and the neurological patterning over time has them extending left foot first to be able to plant. So that becomes their plant. Now, because we're jumping off 2 feet, we need a block. So as a result, the right foot then comes through as their block, and they then become a little bit more patterned to jump in that goofy-footed approach because it allows them to keep the ball away from their opponent and their body on their opponent. When you jump right, left, right-handed in basketball, everything's turned away, and it's good to move through the paint that way. It's just not necessarily as natural for the just the progression standpoint from a basketball player from early age to an advanced level of basketball. They're typically a little bit more catered towards jumping goofy footed.
Mhm.
I can tell that when I see an athlete. It's usually like, do you play basketball? And they go, yeah. And I go, I can tell. But you know as well as I know that in volleyball, as a right-handed athlete, there are disadvantages to having a goofy-footed approach. Now, the disadvantage doesn't lie in the athlete's ability to express pure vertical. The disadvantages lie in the athlete's ability to a couple things. One is going to be able to sight their setter. A lot of times, if we are goofy footed, our swing arm is closed to the setter and we can't open up to be able to see where we're actually looking. So
Mhm.
the timing gets thrown off. Number two is the arm swing mechanics don't favor that position very much. And we know that we can get a lot of damage to the shoulder swinging in that position when they're trying to cross their body without necessarily having that open rib cage, open upper body to the setter and to the court that they're swinging into. So it's going to be a matter of figuring out where that athlete is in their development and whether it's worth converting them from a left right goofy
Yeah.
footed basketball approach to a right left. For me, if like I'm getting a young athlete that is a left right-handed volleyball athlete, my first primary concern is going to be to help them figure the footwork out for their other plant. They're not so far along the road, and I'm certain that you've seen a lot of this. Is their patterns of movement aren't as ingrained as someone who is an elite level 19-year-old plus athlete who has learned to and adapted to jumping goofy footed. I've met some volleyball players that jump goofy footed and are highly talented and highly skilled and have developed resiliency over time. That being said, there's injuries that always kind of parallel along their progression. But yeah, at a young age, I'm going to definitely take some time to show an athlete the mechanics that allow them to have a little bit more advantage in their game, so that they can see the setter, time their approach a little bit more efficiently, and swing with additional rotational power. Because as we open up to the setter, we're able to get a little bit more into our lats, which then is going to allow us to really pull through and apply a lot of force to that ball.
Hmm. Okay, so in your opinion, if you take somebody in their early 20s, late teens who's goofy-footed and refined volleyball-wise, you wouldn't change that even if they're trying to play at a higher level.
At that point, if they're like 19 and 20 years old and not playing at a very high level, and their goal is to, say, progress further, then yeah, we would definitely take a look at addressing the takeoff mechanics. My point would be that if I'm getting an athlete that is pretty resilient and plays at a high level, plays at a very high level with a goofy footed approach, we have to think about, where's that line drawn between, is it advantageous for us to perhaps slow the progression of their career down for a period of time, and does that impact that athlete's ability to progress? Meaning, are they getting looks from schools? Are they, you know what I mean? Like, if you take an athlete and you're like, listen, I'm going to repattern your approach, not only with repatterning the footwork, right now you're repatterning their entire visual field of play. Now everything looks different.
Yeah.
Your hips are open a different way,
Yeah.
right? So there's a lot of these little factors and minutia that I think a lot of people overlook, that are important to take into consideration if you're adjusting people's footwork. It's not just a matter of just go the other way. Now your body has to work in a completely different pattern.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of neurological patterning over time. And it'll get to a point where it's frustrating. It's like first time you take a shot in basketball from your chest as a kid to try to bring that arm up overhead. You're going to have a handful of months to a year worth of your shot being pretty garbage until it's good again.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of finding out whether it's worth it or not, and having that discussion with the athlete. If it's a young athlete or an athlete that isn't necessarily playing at a very high level, I would err on the side of always helping them to address their mechanics and get into a much more advantageous position.
Hmm. Yeah, and it messes with their spacing, most importantly. I mean, where the ball's coming to you, is it coming across different shoulders? And
right.
Yeah.
Especially with that goofy footed, sorry to cut you off, with that
That's right.
goofy footed approach, right? You think about the where their shoulders are in association. If that ball has to cross their entire body versus it's out in front of them, there's so many little things that can go wrong with that. So if you can jump right left as a right-handed athlete, and you do have the ability to change that, and someone that can show you how, you definitely want to take that.
I don't know if you've ever observed this, but Karch Karai. Have you heard of that name?
I'm not familiar with it, to be honest.
He's considered the greatest volleyball player of all time. He's a two-door indoor gold medalist, and a gold medalist on beach.
Beautiful.
It's pretty crazy. 84, 88, 96. And he's only around like 6'2", but played professionally in Italy, won all the major awards. He's got like a mid-40s vertical. He's actually goofy-footed, but he approaches open to the setter. So he's a left-right planter, but then his left goes out in front and his block step is behind. Have you ever seen that before?
I'll be perfectly honest with you, I haven't. As you're speaking it, I'm trying to wrap my mind around the initiation of those mechanics, and what it seems to be is, I was talking a little bit about adaptation and resiliency over time for elite level athletes. This is like a perfect example of someone that has taken the opposing footwork and applied it and was thriving with it. Having their plant in front of the block it means that they're going to have a quite a steep angle of takeoff, right? The closer we can get our block to our plant, I'm not going to lie, I've never heard of it being behind. But if his line of action is creating with his body is far enough back, means that when he plants that initial contact, if his block foot is behind the hip, but his torso is also in line with that plant, it could work. Obviously, it works. That's cool. I'd like to see some video if you can send some over after.
I got to send you.
We'll post a video about that after.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's pretty mind blowing, and it's funny because he's the USA women's head coach now, and
Please tell me he's not teaching people how to do that.
No.
Please say no. Sorry, I swore on this. I hope that's okay. Sometimes I'm Canadian. I drop it every now and then.
Oh, that's fine. That's
good.
Good. Yeah, he's teaching people right, left, and he'll admittedly say like, I did it this way. I had 3 shoulder surgeries. Don't do it this
There you
way.
go, right? The shoulder incident.
Exactly.
So we talked.
Yeah.
He made it work, but you'll notice that the first thing he did was he opened his hips to the setter, right? So, and I'm not sure whether his block or plant were both parallel or whether there were some angles to them, but I'd be interested to see the angles he's creating.
Yeah.
Also be interested to see an MRI of his knees and his back, just because those positions don't make a lot of mechanical sense to me off
Yeah.
the cuff. But if I was to take a look at the video, I could definitely go through that and dive further. And that's really cool, man.
And was like his body type, his Achilles aren't exceptionally long. I would think the only way to make that work, your knees already have to be slightly forward, so your ground contact time has to be like negative
Super
5
sharp.
seconds,
Yeah,
right?
super sharp.
And to generate that much tension, you have to have like a Michael Jordan Achilles tendon.
Hmm.
But his aren't that exceptionally long,
Hmm.
so and he doesn't have the what I call the hyperglute syndrome where your butt you could put like a coffee mug on the glute.
Bubble butt. Yeah.
Yeah, bubble, that's a good one.
Bubble butt.
So he must be just super fast twitch, like an incredibly high percentage. But
Yeah,
I don't
I'd have to
consider
see that body
analysis.
type. That's
Yeah.
pretty incredible to see. I know that when I jumped, so back in my prime, my block came down extraordinarily fast, and my ground contact time was very low. I jumped with a very, very shallow degree of knee flexion. I mean, I think that it'd be safe to say that, yeah, I'd have to show you the video. Like my knees were hardly bent
Hmm.
on takeoff, and people would be like, "I don't understand how you can get off the ground without bending your knees like that." And it has a lot to do with our ability to optimize that ground contact, and that's why I talk a lot about the block being a break and a break step. Where in volleyball, what I see is it's used primarily as another catapulting platform. So you get a lot of volleyball athletes that push into their plant foot, and then their block ends up way far out in front of their plant, and their center of mass is rotated so far over that plant that they only can jump off their block foot.
Mm.
So you're reducing the athlete's ability to produce force because they're not able to utilize the plant as efficiently. And that plant foot is going to have the most stored energy out of both legs. That push into the plant, you're loading and you're winding up that hip so much into that, sinking into that step, right, into that plant foot. If we allow that plant to sink in, but then wait and wait and wait until that block foot is way out in front, then we've bled so much energy out the
Yeah.
glutes and hips and knees. So that's the one thing in the volleyball world that I'm desperately trying to educate and get into coaches' minds is that block foot needs to be utilized for what it's intended. That being said, a late block foot in volleyball is sometimes needed. And I actually just made a post about this today, I believe, probably inspired by this conversation that we're having right now. But
That's right.
the late block foot, if you watch, especially like C-ball or anything out of back row, that when that block foot comes down late, it allows an athlete to cover a little bit more horizontal real estate. And I think that's when it's necessary. When
Mm.
it's not necessary is when an athlete's coming out of, left or right side, and what the goal is to elevate, to have options. And I'm a firm believer in a buddy of mine, Reed Hall, who is the owner of the Athlete Matrix. We were talking about that there. He's a former like national level Canadian volleyball athlete. Talks a lot about there are not bad, or there are no bad sets, just bad approaches. And I know
Mm.
there's a lot of volleyball players right now cringing, going, "No, I've seen plenty of bad sets." But the point it makes is that if the attacker is aware of the set and initiates the approach the same way, then it just comes down to where is the approach starting from
Mhm.
and when is it initiated. The approach should never really change. The initiation of those steps should be the same. It's a cut and paste, simply changing the angle that we attack, simply changing the point on the court we attack from.
Mm.
But the mechanics behind the approach steps should be very, very similar. Now, the argument is that it's very hard to recreate that on every single play, but the more we practice that and the more it's ingrained, the easier it becomes over time. Everything is possible, we just got to give it time to work. And it's when I get athletes that go, "I tried, it didn't work."
Mhm.
And I go, "Okay, so you're just never going to try it again." Like,
Yeah.
this is how you learn to spin serve. This is how you learn to attack with an arm swing over the top and not out to the side. Like, you just keep going. And we're trying to a lot of times undo many years worth of poor patterning and poor motor skill, and that takes time. So
Yeah.
it's that concept, and I think that's my whole entire philosophy of Project Pure Athlete is sometimes we must slow down in order to speed up. And
That's right.
anybody that follows me, it's like I'm a broken record sometimes, but I firmly believe it enough that I tattooed it on my leg in
Mhm.
Spanish. That's another story, but I have it on my body, and I believe in it so wholeheartedly that if an athlete can get perspective, meaning like take a break every now and then, stop, take a look, both figuratively and literally, so much more can be accomplished.
Yeah. I learned something just now. Initially, I thought so. I thought that I'll get athletes where they have a really long, wide base on the last two steps,
Mm.
and then that causes an internal rotation on the penultimate step, right? Because they're
Mm.
trying to get extra distance or some type of extra torque. And I thought by narrowing the stance that would fix the problem, which it does, but it's probably a speed mechanism. So to quickly plant, whereas delaying that plant will cause a wider base.
Yes.
So
Yeah, and the wide absolutely the wider base is going to, like I mentioned, it's gonna lengthen the ground contact time, but it's also going to decelerate the athlete.
yeah.
And what we need to always focus on is the concept of accelerating through a takeoff, not to a takeoff.
Hmm.
And that's, I think, the biggest aha moment, as cliche as it is, the biggest aha moment for an athlete is, holy crap, like a jump doesn't end until I've landed. And once you figure that, there's more urgency to a takeoff. And it talked about in your wonderful intro, you mentioned mindfulness, and the mindful concept of athletics is the understanding that things need to be initiated with intent. Is that if you are going to try to be powerful, you have to think powerfully, and you have to deliberately apply steps.
Hmm.
If you just wait for them to happen, they're lazy. They don't have that same neural connection, and then we lose a lot of that potential energy through those strides.
Yeah.
So that's just trying to drive home the importance of, if you want to jump high, your brain and your body have to be there at the same time,
Yeah.
right? It can't be one or the other. You can go
Yeah.
through the motions, but when we go through the motions 9 times out of 10, we're not pleased with the outcome.
Yeah. And I always tell my players, the intent is the most important and the beginning step, because whether you want to terminate on a point or get a certain type of set, if you don't believe you can do something, your body's just not going to act that way. And I'll tell them, I rather have, we talk a lot about how scoring under pressure on game point, and there are those that roll shot because they're afraid, and there are those that just go for the wall, win or
Yeah.
lose. And I'd rather have someone with bad technique and greater intent than someone with great technique, an amazing arm swing, smooth mechanics, but just not willing to go for it.
Not
And I'm
willing
sure
to
there,
execute. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm the
yeah,
same way. Like I like athletes that have a killer mentality, but also respect and understand the need to have an awareness about what they're doing, right?
yeah.
And maintaining that perspective. So that's a lot of the training I do with my local athletes, and when I travel as well and do workshops, is trying to pass along that message. You
Hmm.
know, you have to be present in what you're doing at that moment, and win, lose, or draw, at the end of the day, you've learned something, you've taken something from this, and that's going to help you make that next step forward. So
Yeah.
yeah, 100%, man.
So you've actually answered the next question, which was, what are the
Check.
common mistakes of volleyball players in their spiking approach?
Mhm.
Next question is, what are specific things that volleyball players should focus on when it comes to jumping? I would say maybe just like three, if you had to reduce it to three things, like a quick and dirty.
Yeah. Do you want me to get into from like a strength conditioning perspective, or more so on like a technical drill standpoint?
Let's see.
Or would you
Let's
like
do
a little
the
bit of everything?
let's do the technical one, because the next one
Yeah.
is going to be exercise related.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, for technical drill wise, I think out of the gate, and this kind of checks one of the ones off that I was going to mention more in the gym, but you can do this on the court as well. As I teach some variations of single leg hops, and the reason I have athletes hopping around on one foot, you'll see a lot of like my workshop footage that comes out, and you'll see these athletes hopping around side to side, front to back. These single leg hop variations accomplish a couple things. And I actually just had a conversation over FaceTime today with a coach from Calgary, actually, that wanted some clarification on some things. And once I was able to explain it like this, he was like, "Oh, I get it now. I totally get it." Is the single leg hop with your trail leg or the hovering leg actually out in front of the leg that you're hopping on. Now, it's not cranked up into a high degree of hip flexion. It's just relaxed out in front. And what this does is it puts the athlete in a really good position to be able to reinforce what we call a stacked position. And I refer to the concept of being stacked. It really just means creating what's called like an axial load or an axial line of action through from top of the spine down the shoulders, hips, and into the ankles. And when we push in through our penultimate stride into our plant foot, we end up on our plant, and the line of action is a nice straight stacked line of action where you actually make heel contact first off your penultimate. Mm-hmm. That heel then rolls through the toe as the block foot comes through and strikes the ground. So these single leg hops help to reinforce neurologically this position of contact. So we create some additional positional stability, and then it gets the athlete a little bit more associated with their glutes. So being able to kind of sit back into the hip is a position that a jumper needs to become familiar with as they make contact on their plant foot. Now, what we can do is, I don't know whether on your end, as you put this up, maybe we can put some video, or we can do another video on this, or you can send them over to my video. Hey, yo.
Yeah, that's right.
But what we get here is the plant foot is basically if you're a right-left plant, the right foot is your plant and your left foot is your block. We want to reinforce a very strong, stable plant so that we don't lose a lot of energy and we're able to transition that speed. So these single leg hops do that. They make an athlete very familiar with that position. And two, they create some opportunities for positional and dynamic stability. So as you hop forward, small and controlled, the joint structure of your ankle, your knees, and your hip receive a little bit of shearing force from that horizontal momentum forward. And that over time, high volume of contacts, high frequency of contacts can help to support the joint structures, create a little bit more resiliency and toughness through the tendons, which again will help allocate itself to a better jump over time. So I would say single leg hop variations are really important. They help to coordinate a lot of things in relation to jump technique that are having a difficult time, say, pushing through their penultimate or covering real estate or distance, could use an overspeed scenario to be able to help facilitate some additional velocity. And that's, I have some videos on that on my channel as well, where we fix a series of bands to an object. That band then gets situated up under the armpits. And the reason we put it in the armpits is so that the athlete actually has to kind of sit tall and back into the band. So again, it reinforces a little bit more of a taller torso. And you asked before, like, what are things that volleyball players aren't necessarily grasping onto? There's a handful, and one of them is the position of the torso through that penultimate stride into the plant. See a lot of athletes, we call it dive through their approach, where their torso is flexed very far forward. And what happens is when they reach their plant foot and they have this like excessive flexion through the hip, is that creates a need for additional ground contact time. If the athlete plants on the floor and we have this flexion, although we do gain some additional hip extension power, it requires time to recover that torso in order to leave the floor, because you cannot leave the floor in that position. It just doesn't happen. So what we want to do is, if we can get an athlete to their plant, kind of almost like squatted a little bit more over that plant foot versus like flexed forward, it'll be a quicker ground contact and they'll carry more horizontal speed through that approach as well. Okay. So there's all these little like tweaks and fixes. And when people see, I'll post a video of an athlete, 10 minutes in between and they're 2-3 inches difference. It's those things. I've just taught that athlete how to carry more of their speed. It's not like I've supercharged their muscles by any means, or, changed them as a person. It's, I've got into their heads a little bit. I've patterned their approach. We get some priming, and then we're just go. And a lot of times it's getting them out of their own head. So yeah, I would start with, single leg hop variations. I just recently went, about 4 or 5 months ago, I was up in Toronto at Ryerson University, which is one of our Canadian university teams here. And I worked with their men's team, and they're all, a lot of them are great jumpers. I had a lot of, 11.6 and above athletes there. They're tall guys. They jump well, but their block foot was so unstable as a whole. So I prescribed them single leg hops, all these different variations and progressions. And like 3 months later, they retested, and almost the entire team messaged me on DM. They were just like, dude, I jumped so much higher. It feels so strong, blah, blah. I can't believe those hops work. And I'm sitting there in front of them like, guys, do these what appear to be very boring hops with intent, mindfulness be there.
Yeah.
I promise you, like I tell people, I'll leverage my career on the fact that these help jumping. However anecdotal it is, and however associated to my experience it is, it works.
Yeah.
And I'll wager my career on it. I've seen it countless times, thousands of athletes. So yes, do some single leg hops. Those of you who are listening right now, do some hops.
As
And
you're
if you don't know
listening
how to
to
do
it.
them, yeah. And if you don't know how to do them, Donnie will let you know where to go to find that.
Yeah. So all these exercises that I was referring to, guys, I'll put the links in the description box and they'll be labeled. So check it out. They're all on his channel. So make sure you do that. All right. Now, I know this is like every trainer's least favorite question because,
You
what are
know
the
how much I don't like this question, but you're going to ask me it anyway.
That's why
I love
we
it.
got to do it.
So I love you for it.
Um, there's so many great exercises, and it's not the exercise that makes the person great, right? It's how you apply it. It's there are certain exercises that are good for certain people, but because we're in the age of short
Instant
snippets,
gratification, baby.
instant gratification, what are your top three? If you had to do like a top three favorite exercises you would prescribe a volleyball player, you only had like 5 seconds to say something to them to try to impact their jumping ability, what would it be?
Yeah, I would probably give them a trap bar deadlift, some variation of horizontal rowing, upper body rowing, and a probably a drop jump as a plyometric to kind of complement that. The reason I would select a trap bar deadlift is traditionally speaking, I get a lot of athletes through the doors as volleyball players that are dealing with shoulder related injuries, so it's a little bit more of a friendly position for their shoulders to be in. Then you can vary, and if you're trap bar deadlifting, you can trap bar deadlift with a hinge, and you can trap bar deadlift as a squat. So it's a really good kind of combination movement where if, let's say, an athlete, I have a lot of athletes that don't necessarily function well with a barbell squat. So I actually have them trap bar squat. And it's a stimulus game, right? We're trying to create a stimulus to the series of musculature that we're working. So for me, because you can turn a trap bar into a traditional hinge, if you know how to hinge properly, you get a lot of the same stimulus as you would through a, say, barbell deadlift. And if it kind of checks the box of a lot of our squatting points of performance as well. The drop jump, because I truly feel like the impulse that's created on landing does a lot of carryover to tendon health and tendon stiffness and creating a little bit more explosiveness through takeoff. And it helps them to pattern a little bit more of the landing mechanics required. You can progress those to both bilateral and single leg landings. So there's a lot of really cool variations to that one that I believe have a lot of crossover to volleyball. And then some type of upper body horizontal rowing, whether it's some sort of like supine body weight row on a TRX or a barbell, just because we're going to get a lot of like that rhomboid upper trap, posterior delt, a lot of the musculature responsible for keeping and maintaining an active shoulder position, because over time, with a lot of swinging athletes and volleyball athletes, we see a ton of either anterior laxity in the shoulder capsule, which you get a lot of that like kind of shoulders forward position, which a lot of people think is only and always from tight pecs. Can be created from an overusage of internal rotation, can create laxity. So making sure that we strengthen the upper back is of utmost importance for a volleyball athlete as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had to pick three, which I hate doing, I would pick a trap bar deadlift, some variation of a drop jump, and then also a horizontal pulling rowing movement.
Cool. Yes.
Yeah. So
So, as these video series is not just going to include some practical stuff, but also some life stuff, because
I like life.
Yeah, and I think there's always a great story behind every great person, and we're not all robots. So I got a couple life questions.
Shoot.
The first one is, what inspired you to be a pro dunker? Because you probably could have gone a lot of avenues, maybe a Canadian track and field Olympian, volleyball and all these other things. But why a professional dunker as your first profession?
I've I've been obsessed with dunking since I was a kid, man. Like I can remember vividly being a child, having a net out back, and then my buddies inviting me out to play basketball, and then I would choose going into my own backyard by myself and practicing dunks on like low goals instead of playing basketball.
Hmm.
I'm a I'm a technician. I'm a skill-oriented human being, and I think it's very evident from how I ended up where I ended up now. Is I prefer dunking over basketball. I prefer attacking over playing volleyball. I would just go out and hit balls all day. Like I love the
Yeah.
concept of just perfecting a specific skill. So I think the draw to dunking was the fact that this was an entire sport based off of skill, right? Like variations of the same. Like one, you have to be able to jump.
Hmm.
Two, you have to be able to dunk. Those are two different skills. People think like if you can jump really high, you're going to be a good dunker. I have met countless people that jump as high, if not higher than me over the years, that don't dunk as well as I do, or
Hmm.
I did, just simply because the skill of dunking is much more difficult than you'd think. You need proof. Go out and put a rim down a little bit lower, and realize that even if you're over the rim, it's still difficult to dunk a ball at times.
Yeah.
Right. So I was just drawn to, I think the amount of skill that was infused into this kind of underground sport. I wasn't at a level that I could have competed as an Olympian in track. I was a national caliber. I could compete, within the national field here in Canada. I'd done a lot of like some international meets here and there. So it was like I knew that, and to be perfectly honest, like the lifestyle of a track and field Olympian for me at that point wasn't something that I was looking to do. I was also a teacher when I was a professional dunker. So I was
Mm.
always doing these things as a passion as opposed to my career. It wasn't until I truly understood that I had the ability to educate people in a field that I was obsessed with and jumping
Hmm.
that I leaned full force into Project Pure Athlete and into actually influencing people around the world as best as I could. Because I said, you know what, I'm an educator first and foremost, and whether I'm educating in the classroom or I'm educating
Yeah.
in a gym, teaching people how to jump, I'm living my true self, and I'm being my authentic self. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
got into dunking because I was obsessed with it, and I just wanted to see what I was capable of. And it was, you miss so many dunks, man. Like as a dunker, when you go and practice, you miss more than you make in a practice setting, so that when you go into a competition setting or a show, the ones you do hit look super easy. And I think that if you ask any viewer or spectator or fan of dunking what they like the most, or what they say is like they make it look so easy.
Yeah.
But there's so much that goes into making something look so easy and effortless. And that's why I love jumping as well, is that when you, and I'm sure that you're the same way, when you see a really well executed jump, you feel it. You don't even see it. You feel it. You're
Yeah.
just like, whew. And I can, when I go to workshops and I'm working with athletes in that combine setting where we're test, retest, test, retest, I can tell through that plant series before they even take off. And a lot of people will look at me and they're like, I got called the jump possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I could definitely tell it's an obsession for you because
A little bit.
people will say the same thing about me with volleyball, where
Yeah.
I will be like within 5 seconds of something, I can name 20 things that happened, what could be better, what went well. And as they're flowing into it, like maybe someone's about to spike, I can tell if someone's going to get blocked or not just because of the first step of the person's spike and the
Hmm.
first step of the person's block.
Blocking.
Like
Yeah.
my assistant coaches, right before they get set, I'll say, "Uh-oh, she's going to get blocked."
Yeah.
As I'm coaching my kids, like, how'd you know that? I was like,
Yeah.
well, it's just things just didn't line up, but it's the library of obsession where you've seen so much footage, and
Intuition, baby.
yeah,
That's amazing. Yeah, no, it's I think that we are both in a really good position doing what we love and doing more so that what we do anyway, and just thankfully being paid a little bit of money for it, which is good.
yeah. So on an even more personal note, elevate yourself is all about underdog, having the underdog mentality, and use that as a motivator to accomplish things that most people wouldn't think you're capable of. And I'm assuming pro dunking, is it mostly black athletes that are participating in it, or is that just NBA?
I think like throughout the years, it's become it's a mixed bag. Like, I mean, I
Okay.
think if anything, we've proven that the human body, no matter what color your skin is or whatever, is very capable. That being said, I think like on a whole, um, like I don't know. I would say it's mixed now. I think when
Okay.
I was in it more so, like I was one of the only few white guys that you'd see. Not a ton of Asian dunkers. I'm not gonna lie. Like there's a few out there that are doing big things, but yeah, and more so you're seeing like even out in China now, like a handful of guys are starting to pop up on the scene. But yeah, mixed bag, I would say now more so than when I was in because
Okay.
I've been retired now for 5 years.
Okay. So what was your experience at that time when it was, being a minority, but also being short, 6 feet,
Mhm.
relative to that industry, and all the stereotypes that come with that, and the assumptions. Like, what was that journey like? And yeah,
Yeah, the white boy can't jump journey is what you're saying? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. To put it
If
lightly.
yeah, if anything, in where I was involved, I think it worked to my advantage more than it worked to my detriment. The barrier to entry to dunking is extremely low. If you can dunk a basketball, you can enter a dunk contest, right?
Hmm.
What will set you apart and what kind of classifies you, at least when I was in there, as being a professional dunker is when you're being paid to do it. When people pay you to go places and dunk for them or contests and pay and you make prize money, it's when you can kind of step outside of that like amateur dunk status. Um, but I think if anything, it was always a bit of an advantage because people don't necessarily expect the 6 foot, 200 pound white guy to be the one putting his head at the rim. And it usually only took one or two of the dunks and warm ups for the judges to be aware. And, early in the stages, that helped. People eventually knew who I was normally when I would come to an event because of YouTube. And I did have a YouTube channel. I was featured on a lot of the other dunk channels
Hmm.
for quite a few years. So typically, like, some of the judges would know who I was and expect the fact that they knew I could dunk. But yeah, I think once you're all out there, there's no color, there's no height, it's just you just got to try to dunk better than the next guy
Yeah.
and work your advantage and work your strengths and try to avoid your weaknesses. So for me, my strengths were always I jumped pretty high and I dunked really hard. I'm a bigger guy, right? So I'm a
Hmm.
bit of like a wider set um, athlete. So I was dunking at 6 foot, 200 pounds, all the way up to at one point I think I was dunking at I think it was just being lazy, but I was like 225, and I remember being like,
Dang.
but still I could still through the leg I could still East Bay, I could still like all this stuff. It was just my skill set as a dunker was outweighing the fact that I had probably 4 or 5 inches less vertical at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I liked the challenge more so of being accepted into the culture of dunking
Hmm.
versus like the physical limitations it provided because naturally I was a pretty good jumper and then worked for probably 18 months at one point just specifically on jumping and managed to gain a heck of a lot of inches on my vertical in about a year and a half. So once I was able to consistently jump like that mid 40s range and I had a lot of options as a dunker, then it wasn't about the ability to jump. It's just being like finding that little bit of swagger, finding that little bit of like where now I'm like this white dude that also has to be likable because that plays into things. So it's like
Yeah.
I think I went more the route of like the goofball and just kind of didn't take myself super seriously. So it seemed to
Yeah.
work out to my advantage pretty well.
Cool.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and I appreciate that insight and that story. And we're all, I think a lot of people who are going to be listening, everyone is on a journey to something, has some type of aspiration, and to know that at some point someone experienced some type of obstacle
Mm.
or someone had to struggle a little bit, I think it was really important for people to remember that, even Michael Jordan wasn't born dunking,
Right.
he had to work at it.
There's a
So,
journey. Everybody's got to walk uphill for a little while. And you know
yeah,
what? I think at the end of the day, you're kind of always walking a little bit uphill and
yeah,
just becoming a little bit more accustomed to being okay with that is going to take you a lot further. I think if the listeners can take anything from hearing me and you talk today is from my side is just don't undervalue the importance of slowing down to
hmm,
speed up because whether you take that physically, metaphorically, it always works out. So just, take some time to stop and smell the roses. I think that's the
yeah.
most important thing.
Especially when the rose is at the rim, it's a lot
Hell
easier
yeah. Just give
to.
that a little sniff. Just watch your head. I've hit it a couple times. It doesn't feel so hot.
Yeah, I remember
training for a while, and I went out and saw the men's university basketball team dunking, and I remember just rolling up and watching, and then asking for the ball, and they kind of looked at me like what? I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, let me try to dunk, and I threw the lob, missed the lob, hit my head on the rim, and I didn't really know what I had done. I kind of just was embarrassed that I missed the ball, if I'm being perfectly honest. But about three of the dudes like left the gym in like full steam, like screaming, like, you hit your head on the rim. And I was like, is that good? I didn't even know at that point. I hadn't watched like YouTube videos. I was just basically like, I was just jumping and I
Yeah.
happened to hit my head on the rim. They're like, yeah, that's really good. None of us can do that. And there's like a
That's awesome.
7-footer there. He's like, I can't even do that.
Yeah, that's
So it
the
was cool.
best.
Yeah.
All right, guys, don't forget to check out the second part of this interview where Tyler will be interviewing me on his channel, Project Pure Athlete. All right. Cool. Well, that's all we have time for today. And once again, to recap, Tyler's got a YouTube channel, really educational. It's similar content as his Instagram, but it's much more in-depth and more variety. So that's Project Pure Athlete on YouTube and Project Pure Athlete on Instagram too, right?
Correct.
And then he has a website with a really good jump training program if you're looking for a specific workout to get your inches up and to learn some specific techniques and his philosophy. You can buy that on his website as well.
Attaboy. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, well, I'll take suggestions from you guys. If there's anybody you would like me to interview on the next episode of The Dig, just leave your suggestions in the comment section. And I imagine this won't be the only time that we'll be having these talks to you guys that are obsessed with jumping and sports and what it means to be a high-level athlete. So we'll definitely meet again.
You got it.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me on, Donnie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Tyler, and wish everybody a happy new year.
Take
All
care.
right, take care.